Well, top of the morning to you if you happen to be in some Irish loving community around the world. Good morning to you if you are, let's say, in Santiago, Chile, or Vancouver, British Columbia. Good afternoon if you are in Irish loving cities like Chicago, New York, and Boston. Top of the evening to you, especially if you are in Ireland, where my guest is today. Today being March 14th of 2025, right before St. Patrick's Day. It's my tradition on Fred Plotkin on Fridays to have an Irish guest. And welcome to Fred Plotkin on Fridays on Adagio, the place where classical music happens. I'm wearing a green shirt, by the way, for the occasion. This is the place where classical music happens. As you know, Adagio is a video and audio streaming platform dedicated to supporting artists and to making classical music and opera available to music lovers all over the world. And my guest today is a lovely artist, a lovely Irish woman. This is also March, so all of my guests this month have been women because it's International Women's Month. I don't keep them only in March, but I decided for March I want all women. And for this day, March 14, 2025, an Irish woman. And it is Niamh O'Sullivan who joins us, I believe, from Ireland. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm in Dublin right now.
You're in Dublin right now. Well,
Yeah.
welcome. You and I met in Dublin a number of years ago. We'll talk about that. Um, Niamh is what they call a rising mezzo-soprano. And by that, we mean that she has been noticed by the operatic powers that be and audiences who have noticed all of her talents, or at least a lot of them. I spotted her very early in a master class in Dublin when you were still a student and knew that you were destined for greatness. And so I'm very happy that we are connecting about 9 years later, I think, to have a good conversation about what you've done since the last time I saw you. So, Niamh O'Sullivan, welcome.
Thank you very much, Fred. Thank you for having me.
So, let's start with your education. I know that you come from a family of educators, if I'm correct, and you have a special feeling for education. How does
Absolutely.
how does education as a practice, as a way of studying your roles, as a way of approaching the world, as a way of acting and performing in rehearsals, how does that inform your approach?
Well, I mean, our job is one that you have to be, it's a very dedicated one. We need to be good learners. We need to be, able to learn quickly and be spontaneous, And so I guess for me, college taught me, yeah, how to learn music as quickly as I can if I have to, with a lot of detail. Languages, of course, is a massive part of our job. Um, and so basically, when I was in the academy in Dublin, I didn't actually get to finish my undergraduate because I got a position at the opera studio at the Bayerische Staatsoper in Munich. So I didn't get to complete my education with it, which my mother wasn't very happy about. But but she understood. I mean, this what I got to do earlier, which was go to Munich, was what I wanted to do after my studies. So it just came early, and I had to kind of go with it.
So I've had other guests on this program, including earlier this month, Samantha Hankey, who is
Yes,
another mezzo-soprano, an American from Massachusetts, which is a very Irish state. I even asked her if she's part Irish, and she said yes. Um,
yes.
and it seems that the Bavarian State Opera, the Bayerische Staatsoper in Munich, they have a wonderful program for young artists, that we know. Um, and they seem to have a special feeling for mezzo-sopranos. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, I mean, also, of course, Tara Rocht was there too, another fellow
Yes.
Irish mezzo-soprano who also we studied with the same teacher in Dublin. And yeah, I mean, the program is one of the best in the world, absolutely, and they've rolled out a good few mezzos. I mean, every voice type, but of course, I know Tara very well, and Samantha wasn't in the young artist program, but she was in the ensemble there. But yeah, I mean, I was just so lucky to get to go to Munich at such a young age. I was only 21, and it was had huge challenges at that age. Of course, moving to a new city was the main thing. I mean, I was very much a kind of home bird and a very young student, you could say, but was very, very dedicated and very ambitious, I guess, from a young age, which stood to me. But yeah, I was 21 and had to go jump into this very prestigious opera house and kind of try to swim. But it was the kind of making of me, I could say actually.
So, if I can ask, if you were 21 when you went to Munich, I'm trying to compute the years. You would have been 19 or 20 when I heard you.
Yes, I think I was 19, so
Yeah.
11 years
So
ago.
I am stunned by that, and I'll tell you why. Um, I have long career in opera back to 1972. I've encountered very few young, very young singers who seem fully formed and very prepared and able at as teenagers. And I didn't realize you were a teenager. I would put you in this category.
Yeah.
Frankly, there were just two. There was Danielle Denise, who I first met and heard, worked with when she was 19, and Nadine Sierra, who was either 19 or 20, I forget. So now you're the third. And I'm pointing this out because it is exceedingly rare to find someone who already not only has a beautiful voice, but enough technique to be able to use it properly. And also the ability to work on the stage, to learn languages, and all of those things, which usually comes with a lot more work. I don't remember his name, but in one of the classes I attended where you were one of the students, um, there was a very tall, lovely, shy Irish bass, and he was 19 or 20. And I know that he probably has gone on to great things, but there's no way that he at 19 could have been taken to Munich to perform in Munich. And how did it happen then that you were found and brought to Munich at such a young age?
Yeah, so it came from the Veronica Dunn International Singing Competition. So I was 21, and Ronnie, my teacher, who is Veronica Dunn, said to me that I should enter, and I said, Ronnie, at the time you needed 10 arias for the competition, and I definitely didn't have 10 arias at the time, but Ronnie, we picked some and we found 10 anyway. And so I did it, and I got to the quarterfinals. So I only got, I really wasn't ready for an international competition, but I had something, I guess, at that age, and there was a lot of potential and whatever. So I got to the quarterfinals, and Henning Ruhe, who was on the jury at the time, he was the head of the opera studio in Munich, and
Huh?
he came. We had a feedback session with him, and he came to me and he said, "Look, would you come and audition for the studio in Munich? We're actually still looking for a mezzo for next season." And I said, "Oh my God," because Ronnie had, told me about the studio because of Tara had went a few years prior. And that was, Ronnie said to me, "We'll get you to Munich," was one of the first things she said to me. And she thought this was the best house. And, she had the experience from seeing Tara there. So I went to Ronnie and I said, "He asked me to come and audition." And of course, my mom said, "But you haven't finished your studies." But anyway, that was neither here nor there. And so I went over with my mom, and I did the audition, sang my first two arias, and then they invited a few more people to come, or a few of us to come back and sing another aria. And then I sang my last aria, and they said to me, "Would you like to come to the intendant, Herr Bachler, said to me, "Would you like to come to Munich?" And I said, "Yeah." And then he said, "Welcome." And that was on the day of the
Wow.
audition. And this was April 2016. And I started in Munich in September 2016 then.
Um, and I met you, I guess, in October 2015, I'm guessing.
Yeah, yeah.
I was working in Wexford, and I brought my mother, and we had this lovely more than one day at the Royal Irish Academy of Music, where I had been before, and it's a magnificent institution we'll talk about. But that's very impressive. I want to say something about Henning Ruhe, who had the good taste to single you out. I
Yes.
know Henning, he was on this program probably 18 months ago,
Okay.
and he now has a senior position in Sweden. Is it Malmo or Gothenburg? I think it's
Gothenburg.
Gothenburg. Yeah.
Gothenburg, yeah.
and really super talented, intelligent, full of taste. And so that doesn't surprise me now that you tell me that it was he who invited you. Yeah, that makes
Yes,
sense.
and I have him to thank for a lot. I mean, he was in the studio. I had 2 years on the program, and he was director of the studio for 1 year, and then the second year he wasn't with us anymore. But he was the one who believed in me at a time where I didn't really even believe in myself, you know. So he was the reason I was in Munich. Yeah.
So, how did your mother feel?
When I got the place,
Yeah.
I mean, well, of course, there was no question that there was no question about me staying in Ireland. So, of course, first she said, oh, look, we can, the degree and whatever. And, and I thought, oh God, I'll never get around her with this. But soon after, she realized the importance of it, And I mean, my mom and my dad are both learning with me all the time about the industry. And, like, of course, education, like we said, is it's super important in every career. But there was just no question that I would have to finish my degree before I go over. If I said no to that place, it mightn't have come again. So my mom pretty soon after realized the importance of it and was absolutely fine with it. Yeah.
Um, I wonder at what point a person, I've known other people in your position who did not finish university or high school or whatever because they were given such a good opportunity. And, their parents and not only their teachers might say, well, you need to fall back on your degree just in case. Or maybe you're just not quite ready. At what point we realize that perhaps the education we would have gotten in the academy we're getting in our theaters, in our lives, in our hospitals, we're medical workers. And it's interesting because you, in a very short period of time, have acquired so much practical musical knowledge and life of the stage, life of the theater, rehearsal systems, a different language, German, all of that in a very short period of time, plus doing a lot of roles.
Absolutely. I mean, that's for us as opera singers, it's all practical. I mean, this was the only way to learn the business was to go there and be in a German system, learn the workings of an opera house, rehearsal schedule, learning things quickly. Like I said, in the studio we had sometimes 3 concerts a week with 3 different programs, or sometimes I had 3 different roles in a month.
Yeah.
Because in a house like Bayerische Staatsoper, they sometimes rehearse 3 or 4 operas at once, and sometimes as a studio member you're usually put into a lot of things. So you learn how to cope with singing maybe a Czech opera and English opera and Handel at one time.
Hmm.
um, so I mean, it's the only way really to learn, to learn the way of the business. And of course, there were things that I hadn't got to study. Actually, in third year of my degree, I would have learned. We had a French class, and in fourth year we had German. So actually, I didn't get to do French or German in college. I got to do Italian in first year, and Italian in second year. So that those were things I just had to learn as I went. But it was fine. It worked that way. And of course, being in Germany, there was no better way of learning German than being in Germany, of course.
Even Bavarian German.
Which is slightly different. It's not very different. It's very different actually. But
Very
to be honest,
different.
yeah, it's completely. But I, luckily in the opera house, it's mostly English that's spoken there, But we
Yeah.
had a German class in the studio, and yeah, just being in Germany, of course, really helped my German. Yeah.
When I first got to Munich, I was 20. It was October of 1976. And I went to the Staatsoper. I had a wonderful time. I was living in Italy and working in the Italian system. And I thought I knew some German until I got to Munich. I didn't know what
Grüß dich.
anybody was saying. And they said to me, well, where did you learn your German? Hamburg? And I said, well, Bologna.
No, it's completely different. I was lucky enough I lived when I was in the studio, I lived with a beautiful couple who are now dear friends of mine. Actually, one of them passed away a few months ago, but Caro and Peter, they're a Bavarian elderly couple that are big opera fans, and they were happy to have a member of the studio living with them. So I lived with them for 2 years, and now they're dear friends. But yeah, I learned some nice Bavarian phrases from them, which now I can't really remember a lot of them. But yeah.
Um, Munich is very particular. It's a large city. It's probably the third largest in Germany. I believe it's Berlin, Hamburg, then Munich. Um, Bavaria is the richest province of any province in Europe. They hugely support the arts, the performing arts, also visual arts. They have the Sammlung, their museum. They have wonderful collections of art because Bavaria was its own duchy or region or kingdom, whatever it was called, um, connected actually to Salzburg more than to other parts of what we now call Germany. Um, the quality and the devotion to art is kind of stunning. And Mozart's Idomeneo was premiered in Munich, and actually in his lifetime was financially the most successful opera he had because it was tied to Munich. So even going back to the 1780s, there has been this tradition. And it's believed that Mozart's father was from either Bavaria or Swabia nearby. And therefore, the connections were very distinct because at that time, um, Salzburg was not tied to Vienna officially. It was closer to Munich politically and otherwise. And therefore, this part of Central Europe is incredibly rich in the traditions of opera, going back to Baroque and even earlier. Munich has a beautiful theater. Is it the Prince Regententheater? Is that what it's called?
Yes, the
Which is
Prince
a
Regent.
gorgeous theater from 200 plus years ago. So when you arrived in Munich, I know you were 21, and I know it was a new language and all of that. Did you begin to sense that this was not just another German-speaking city, but that the traditions and the connection to the arts, especially opera, are much deeper than places you might have known before or heard of?
Absolutely. I mean, the main thing that I noticed was how many young people went to the opera, and children, like really like 4 or 5 year olds who knew the text to the Magic Flute, to Die
Yeah.
Zauberflöte, and they knew Papageno, and they knew Pamina and Hänsel und Gretel and stuff. I mean, it was just normal for them to go to the opera at Christmas time, and also the in the Staatsoper they do a lot of Kinder operas, so lots of small operas that they put on in the foyer of the opera house where children come. They're called kissen concerts. The children come and they sit they bring a little cushion with them, and they sit and they watch, and they're so enthralled, and they know what opera is. They're not like laughing at opera singers because it's such a strange thing to hear for the first time. Opera, if you hear an opera, I remember hearing an opera singer for the first time, thinking, "My God!" And you would almost laugh because it's such an extraordinary sound. But they're so. That was the main thing for me, to see the children at the opera, and so easy for them, so natural for them. And this is something that, yeah, I wish, was everywhere. And I think it is becoming more worldwide now, hopefully. I mean, now that we have the Irish National Opera here, it's becoming much more a thing accessible to everyone, I think, and more normal for everyone as well to go to the opera. So,
Am I correct that you sang Hansel in Munich?
yes, I did, in the Prince Regenten Theatre.
Yeah, oh my goodness. So singing in this historic theater, an opera by Humperdinck, the leading quote male role in the opera, the mezzo-soprano, um, in front of an audience of native speakers. What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, of course, everything that we did as part of the studio, we were prepped for really, really well. So, I had coachings on Hensel for weeks before that project. And so I felt pretty confident, but of course you never know, especially I mean, it was a massive challenge, but now I know, at least I've done Hensel for a German audience, so I'm sure I can do it elsewhere. It was gorgeous. It was one of my first big roles that I got to do ever as an opera singer. So that was I think probably my biggest role up until then that I did. Yeah.
So for listeners who may not have seen Hansel and Gretel for decades, Um, there are two little starving children out in the forest. When I teach opera to people, I try to point out this opera is not being, quote, a kid's opera, but an opera with Wagnerian quality music that happens to be about children. But it's also about starvation, it's about hunger, it's about issues that people face in life. And if you make it super cute and super sweet, it's missing part of the issues that the children have. Hansel breaks a bottle of milk, if I recall, and his mother gets very upset at him and
Yes.
yells at him, and the children leave and they go out on the road, and their father, Peter, comes home singing as as he would do. And where are the children? Well, they've gone. And then it becomes, missing children out in the forest,
Sure.
starving, not knowing where they're going. Hansel being a boy and Gretel being a smarter girl, which is always the case. And they find their way to this house that is made of gingerbread or of other delicious Bavarian things. And they're hungry. So they start eating. And then the witch comes in, nibble, nibble, mousy, who's nibbling at my housey. It was the English translation.
Knusper, Knäuschen. Yeah.
And then the witch feeds the children, but especially Hansel. Gretel is suspicious, but feeds Hansel, and then basically wants to fatten him up so she can eat him. Now that's horrendous, actually. If
Very dark when you think of it like that. Yeah.
and Gretel is the one who, when her brother in some productions, I don't know about yours, is put in an oven, is the one who liberates him, and the oven explodes, and all the little gingerbread children convert back into children.
Yes.
And it's a very scary thing going on there with magnificently beautiful music
Oh,
by Engelbert Humperdinck, not the one we think of, but the original one. Um, the chorus, I know it in English because I did in English years ago. Hansel, Hansel, don't you cry. 14 angels in the sky.
yeah.
And they're the 14 angels. And it's the most beautiful thing. And I always wonder, when children see that, are they frightened by the scary parts? Are they delighted by all the cakes and the sweet things? Or do they really hear the music? Because that music is so gorgeous. There's no other word for it. That I remember when I attended when I was about 5 years old, it was the music for me. It was not the story.
Yeah.
And in your production that you were in, was it, quote, a traditional production? Was it a slightly risky production? How did they do it?
Well, actually, to be honest, we only did it was a semi-staged because it was
Okay.
with the youth orchestra of the Bayerische Staatsoper, which was called the Attack Orchestra, and
Yeah.
so they were all on the stage, and we did a kind of a semi-staged thing in front of them. Um,
Nice.
but it was a semi-stage. But the production that's on in the main stage at the Bayerische Staatsoper is the Richard Jones production that's on at the Met as well, and this is, I think, the most beautiful production of Hansel and Gretel. I think it gets the innocence as well as the darkness. I think it's absolutely stunning, and so that's the production I know in Munich. And yeah, I guess it just depends on the production which way maybe a child might go, with their mind. But the music, I mean, is just so powerful.
So in the voice category for The Witch, it's been done by mezzo-sopranos, by Wagnerian sopranos, by
Yes.
male tenors. What voice category did you have in Munich when you did that?
We had a dramatic mezzo actually, but I've heard it mostly done in Munich. They usually take a tenor for it. So I heard John Dashak do it. I heard Wolfgang Sperhacke,
Mm.
Kevin Connors. So it was, and I think it worked really well. It worked really well in the Richard Jones production anyway as a man. But it's a really difficult sing because it's like quite high and quite low and quite dramatic, and obviously it's mostly character. So, um, but yeah,
And with a lot of makeup and a lot of body armor and so forth.
yes,
It's a tough role.
yeah, it is.
The last time I saw it, I believe the last time was with the late British tenor Philip Langridge, who was
Okay,
spectacular. in that role.
Great.
Um, he was not Dame Edna. He was not that. He played it very seriously, and the humor and
Yeah,
the scary part came out through through his playing it straight.
I'm
So,
sure.
um, so when you are in the Bavarian State Opera and they're doing Madame Butterfly and you do Kate Pinkerton and they're doing La Traviata and you do Flora, you get to be in rehearsals, you get to work with conductors, you get to watch bigger stars because you're still very young, in their leading roles, and you have important roles. Flora is a very important role in La Traviata. She, in my view, Flora is one of two roles in La Traviata, the other being Annina, the servant to Violetta, who provide feminine energy in what otherwise is a very masculine environment with
Sure.
fathers and sons and barons and all those different people. But Violetta can only turn to two women, and one of them is her friend, Flora, and the other one is sort of her nanny, her caretaker at the very end, Annina. And when you played that role, were you given direction ideas? Did you evolve your own ideas about who Flora is? I don't know who you played opposite as Violetta.
Yeah, I mean, well, so Traviata is probably the production in Munich is probably one of the oldest productions that they have there. And so usually it's a very quick rehearsal period, so 5 days, 6 days. So all I remember is that it was very quickly done. Um, and yeah, I mean, we had the most amazing cast. It was Eileen Perez, it was Charles Castronovo, and it was Placido Domingo as
As
Germont.
the father.
Yes.
Wow.
So it was, and we had Marco Miliato conducting. So
Oh.
it was really like I couldn't believe that I was part of this. It was incredible. So yeah, I mean, for these revival productions versus new productions, there isn't much time, especially as a smaller role, to have much input yourself. I mean, it's up to you to create a kind of a exciting and character on stage, but it's more about just movements and where you're going to stand and where you're going to be. And um, but that there was I learned a lot from doing those revival productions because think fast. Usually you're not on the stage until the night of the opening night, so you're rehearsing in a rehearsal room, and then I got to, at the interval, go onto the stage to see what my next thing is. Um, but yeah, so and then of course for the new productions, you have much more time to kind of build characters and interpret things yourself and that. So yeah.
So given that Flora was a very quick uh, undertaking, how did you see her and build into her character? And to what degree, if any, did you respond to the performance of Eileen Perez, who's a fantastic Violetta, um, and has done it in various productions in different
Yes.
places? And therefore, she would have brought the experience of doing it in different productions with different co-stars. But you were, I don't want to say facing, you were working with in two very important scenes, um, a very experienced Violetta, but someone who gives you a lot to play off of.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. I mean, it's very easy. It's very easy to build a character and to act on stage against these people. I mean, it's like the best way possible to do a role debut, even if it's Flora.
Yeah. Not
So
even Laura's a very important role.
it
It
is, and it was
really,
probably
really is.
one of the best roles that I got to do in Munich. It was one
Yeah.
of the most, and yeah, and so of course, it was like, yeah, these working with Eileen, I mean, it felt quite natural to just fit into the scene. I didn't do that much work on characterization. It just kind of came to me, and then yeah, I got to do it again with Erman Alayaho. And
Oh my goodness.
yeah, and so we did it twice, and then also Butterfly with Ermanella as well. So yeah, I was very lucky in Munich.
Um, I wonder if anyone has spoken to you about appearing in either, not because you're Irish, um, these are nun operas, but two magnificent operas that are full of great roles for women are Poulenc's Dialogues of the Carmelites and Puccini's Suor Angelica. And Erminella Yaho, when you've seen her Suor Angelica, is one of the most amazing experiences that one can have as an opera goer.
I did it with her in Munich. I did Sor Angelica
Did.
with her in Munich.
Okay, I'm
Yeah.
gonna ask you that in a minute. She was on my show maybe 3 years ago now. She was doing Suor Angelica in Barcelona. And I'll I invite viewers to just go to YouTube, Fred Plotkin, Ermonella Yaho, ERMONELAJAHO. And just watch her, not me, just listen to her and how she talks about Suor Angelica. So, given that you've had that experience, talk about that.
Well, I mean, Ermanella is someone, she is an unbelievable artist. I mean, she says herself that every performance she does, she treats it as though it's her last. And so, um, as um, as an artist with her on stage, it is incredibly inspiring to see how far she goes on stage. Usually, I mean, at the end of Swear Angelica, I thought that she was actually going to pass out. Like she was shaking so much, she was holding the curtain. I mean, she gives it her absolute all. Every single time, I've never seen her hold back in anything. Um, we did Butterfly together, Traviata together, and Swear Angelica together, and I mean, her three main roles. And I mean, I think the most intense out of those three roles is definitely Sor Angelica. And it was fascinating to see her to build because this was a new production, so we worked on it for 6 weeks. And to see her build it from the first week of rehearsals to the opening night, I mean, that was the if that was the only thing I learned or watched in my time in Munich, that was enough. I've taken a lot of things from her um, as an artist. You know, she sometimes risks things vocally. She says it herself. She doesn't care sometimes about her singing. She just goes, I mean, and she does this most stunning pianissimo. I mean, I think it's the most beautiful pianissimo I've ever heard. You know, she always just, she's not afraid to fail, I don't think. I mean, she never fails, but she just goes for it. And if that means hitting cracking a note or screaming a phrase, she doesn't care. I mean, if it's part of the character, it's part of the character. And that's really, really inspiring. As a young artist, as we always feel like we have to be perfect, or we always feel like it's that, we can't, we have to sing everything. It's not always just about singing, of course. It's only a tiny percentage of what we do.
So there are at least two schools of thought on what you raise, and I'm not taking one side or the other, but I want to bring them up to you and to our listeners. One would be the Renata Scotto school of thought, which said what you just said, that you have to occasionally allow the sound not to be beautiful. You have to take risks. You have to, quote, go there to whoever there is to achieve a dramatic effect that is transforming for you, the artist, that is cathartic for the audience, but often requires um, a bit of taxing or potential damage to one's own instrument. Then there's the Morella Freni school of thought, which would say never damage the principle. Leontine Price always said, protect the principle and live and work on the interest. And Leontine Price had a very long career. Morella Freni had a very long career. Other artists, and I think another one that we describe this way would be Beverly Sills, did things that were not necessarily beautiful in operas like Roberto Devereux, but that were stunningly dramatic. And her voice went earlier. Renata Scotto's voice didn't go as early as Beverly Sills, but it changed a lot and went earlier. I don't have a position on that. It's not my role to tell a singer what she should do. I can, if asked, offer my suggestion, but I would never tell anyone this is what you should do. But it's interesting because I'm sure you will have also worked with or will work with singers who take the Morella Freni Leontine Price approach of beauty, of maintaining the vocal estate. And have you maybe worked with an artist who is more of that type, who
Have
impressed you
I?
nonetheless?
Have I? I'm trying to think. I mean, You know, of course there are some singers who are like vocally flawless. Actually, most recently, I worked with Ben Bliss actually in
Yes.
Semele.
We're going to
And
get into that in a big way.
yes,
I want to
and
talk
I
about that.
oh
Yeah.
Ben is brilliant. And I said to Ben after every rehearsal, Ben, you are perfect. I said I've never heard you on edge. I've never heard you crack. You've sang every single rehearsal. His voice was honestly flawless from rehearsal day one to last performance. So I could guess he's just in my head right now, but he was a very, very flawless vocal technician and vocal and just singer. And also he's a great actor, but you can just tell he takes the voice very seriously, and that. And I mean, both ways are right, both ways are right. And some people risk more the voice, and I think he doesn't, but I also really liked that about him. I mean, it was very inspiring as well to see such a consistent uh, vocals throughout the whole period. So yeah, he's the one that comes to mind there.
I agree with you about his singing and his performance and his choices, but I'm going to give you a piece of advice from an older colleague.
Yeah,
Never tell a tenor he's perfect.
I didn't know what you were going to say. I know. They don't need an extra head, they don't. I'm sure he loved it when I told him. I'm sure he loved it.
You mentioned someone who I adore as a friend, but also as an artist, is Marco Armediato, the conductor. And Marco, who I've known for decades, we're the kind of friends we meet up, we give each other big hugs, and
Aw,
he's a wonderful man. He's a wonderful artist. And I wrote an article years ago about him because there was a period at the Met when certain conductors either got sick or who knows what, that Marco was conducting 6 out of the 7 performances every week for a month
wow.
and set the record for the most performances conducted in a month by any conductor. And the article was called Everybody Loves Marco because he has this ability, in my view, to bring out the best in people. He's so sovereign in the repertory he conducts, which is mostly Italian and some French, that he can, and he's still very energetic. He can conduct Bohème in the afternoon and Turandot at night, and then have a day off and lead a rehearsal, and then conduct Tosca on Monday and Lucia di Lammermoor on Tuesday. It's rather remarkable because it's at a very high level. But we were talking at the very beginning of our conversation about the role of education. Marco is someone I think who is an innate educator, but he doesn't set out to teach, if you know what I mean. He educates through example, through making suggestions that are not, they're not orders, they're suggestions. But every time I've watched him in rehearsal and then seen the effective performance, he's right. And he's a conductor who works with singers, especially if you're jumping into a performance, meaning you're stepping in for another colleague, um, where he will change the pace for you. He'll allow more breathing at a certain point. He's so good at the spontaneity that opera requires. And frankly, not every conductor, not every singer is as good as. He's really good
Sure.
at that.
That actually
So,
reminds me of
yeah,
when we did Traviata. He was definitely one of the conductors that was the most trusting of like a young singer. Say so, I had a few. You always have conductors when you're a young artist, and they don't really trust you, and they're very kind of force things upon you without allowing you have an opinion. But I do remember that he was willing to let me do my own thing, which was really nice. And now that you said he's very spontaneous, he can. There was a night where I think Domingo said to him, "We won't do the cabaletta of his aria. We won't do the cabaletta tonight. I'm not feeling it." And then I remember in the performance, Domingo just did that, and then they did it. And this was just in the moment, and that just reminded me, yeah. So he said at the like beforehand, no, I don't think I'll do it. And then he said, yes, let's do it. And then they just did it. So yeah.
There's this wonderful line in La Boheme that sort of passes, but I believe it's Rodolfo. I should know this by now, where he says, "Non sono in vena." I just don't feel it. I'm not in the mood right now. When he has to write, and he can't because he's thinking of Mimi.
Yeah.
Um, and it's a similar thing with artists of the generation and of the quality of Placido Domingo, that he can, in the middle of a performance, do that. I remember once watching him in Milan with Riccardo Muti, and he didn't necessarily feel he had the top notes in the role he was singing, and they agreed to take it down a third. And then during the performance, he looked at Muti and raised his hand like that, and Muti understood. So Muti is like shifting a gear on a car, um, shifted the gear and brought the whole orchestra up to the original key, and Domingo
Isn't that
sang, and the crowd
amazing?
went wild. But during
That's
the
the dream.
performance, yeah, during the
Yeah.
performance, and Domingo was in his 50s by then,
Wow.
and yeah, it was remarkable.
Yeah.
So I know, because I have friends in the business, that you have spent some time lately in Zurich. And
Yes.
John Andrea Nozeda, when we talk about friends, there are many people who are colleagues in the business. He is actually a friend. So I watch everything he does, even from
Yeah.
afar. And I know that he undertook a very successful ring cycle recently. And you were one of the Rhine maidens.
Yes, I was.
So
This was one
talk,
of, yeah.
because we're talking mostly about Italian roles to now. Um, Being in a new production of the biggest opera production there is, Wagner's Ring Cycle, you were in Gotterdammerung, I believe. Were you Welgunda?
So I did Valgunde in Rheingold, and I did Valgunde in Götterdämmerung. Yeah.
Okay, but in Zurich, you did it only Gotterdammerung or also in Rheingold?
I did both in Zurich. Yeah.
Okay, so talk about, I mean, here we had a great conductor, but he was doing the Ring for the first time. It was a new production. It was a cast of very well cast singing actors. I hate the term, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
A lot of people can just sing fantastically, or a lot of people may have acting skills. These were singing actors. And I saw some of it on video, and it was a very theatrical, in a good sense, production. And the Zurich Opera House is not the biggest. The backstage is not the biggest.
Sure.
Therefore, they had to make accommodations scenically. But talk about, dipping not your toe, but your whole body, because you're a Rhine maiden in Wagnerian waters in the city where Wagner lived.
I
You
know.
can
I mean,
forget that.
it was a massive thing for me. I mean, it was really the thing internationally that, of course, Munich was the first thing that set my career. But I really think that the Ring in Zurich kind of really brought me to this next step. First of all, working with John Andrea was an incredible thing. Working in Zurich, where Wagner was, of course, and then doing a new production of The Ring there, was just felt like such a massive step for me in my career, and welcomed me and opened me to the world of Wagner, which now is one of my favorite uh, composers, and I'd love to do Kundry in the future, and I mean, who knows, but I really really love the music. um
Rangena,
which and
Rangena
who knows, that's a tough one.
starts in Ireland.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, I remember seeing Parsifal and Tannhäuser in Munich when I was there in the studio, and I mean, I'm in love with Wagner's music. It's one of my favorites. But yeah, I spent a lot of time in Zurich doing Rheingold new production, of course, and then I came back the 2 years later to do Götterdämmerung, and then came back the end of that season to do the full ring. And so I spent a lot of time in Zurich, as well as doing Falstaff there with Gian Andrea and doing Carmen with Gian Andrea there as well.
I didn't know.
So
Were you Meg Page?
I was Meg, yes.
Well, that's kind of a natural.
I mean, I always say poor Meg. I mean, everyone else in the opera gets a lovely aria or something interesting, and Meg just kind of follows everyone around, you know. But it was
But
fun.
the great Susan Graham, early in her career, was a fantastic Meg Page.
Okay,
Oh
yeah.
yeah, because years ago I was talking to her, and I said to her, just apropos of nothing, "What's the worst costume you ever had to wear in your opera career. She said Meg Page. And the reason was whoever designed it, it was for an outdoor theater. It was hot. It was the summer, but
Okay.
decided to put them all in woolens. And Susan Graham said that these were itchy woolens. They were very hot.
Oh no, I was lucky. I had a nice. I mean, it's an old production in Zurich, but I had a nice dress. And as Rhine maidens, we were in pajamas, silk white pajamas. So the most comfortable costume I ever had.
Um, did you get to Wagner's house while you were in Zurich?
Yes, we had a tour there actually. When I got to Zurich first for Rheingold, they brought us around. Yeah.
Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, it was so long ago now. I just remember being so overwhelmed by the whole, okay, coming to Zurich to do the ring cycle, and then we're being brought around. And then we sang a concert near enough to the house, I think, where the Rhine Maidens sang a scene, their first scene. I mean, it's amazing, to be there, to be in this house, and then to get to sing the music, in Zurich. Yeah, it was, I mean, completely amazing.
I remember from now, I should say that in 2013, Wagner and Verdi had their 200th birthdays, and Benjamin Britten had his 100th birthday. And I was fortunate at that time to be asked to do a whole series of articles about in the footsteps of Richard Wagner and the footsteps of Giuseppe Verdi,
Wow.
and a couple of steps in the life of Benjamin Britten. And it meant that I was traveling all over Europe and parts of the Americas for Benjamin Britten and visiting the places. And I remember so well the house in Zurich. I remember the lawn leading up to the house, but I
Yes.
remember the staircase where I believe it was Christmas morning or Christmas Eve. Wagner composed the Siegfried Idyll for Cosima. And they showed you the staircase where he had her and their children sit on the steps while he, at his piano, was below, playing for the first time as a Christmas gift to them, the Siegfried
Wow.
Idyll. When you stand in that spot where you knew that he was there playing his music and composing his music, it's a remarkable experience. It's like being in a studio where Michelangelo going to the Sistine Chapel and he painted the ceiling and you're there alone
Sure, it
because
almost doesn't feel real. No, it's
I
mad to think
know
that actually was, yeah.
that he was there playing the piano and this is where he composed and
Well,
this is where he walked. I had the same experience in Luzerne where I was working for the same project. And because he went walking in the woods as he was working on Die Walküre and Siegfried. And I just listened to the sound of nature in the woods. And I could hear how this translated into the forest murmurs in Siegfried.
amazing, yeah.
And it's rather stunning if
Sure.
people pay attention to that. So I
Yeah.
can only imagine, or perhaps not, what it was like for you as a very young artist
Yeah.
to be in the place where it was created. It's an astonishing
Absolutely.
thought. Yeah.
It was definitely a massive highlight of my career so far. And
Yeah.
then we got to do it in Covent Garden, new production as well of Rheingold, and I'll go back for Götterdämmerung in 2 years as well.
So
So
that was Maestro Antonio Pappano in Covent Garden.
yes, which
Correct.
was amazing. I mean, Gianandrea and Papano are very different, completely different.
Talk
Um,
about that.
yeah, I mean, I guess with Papano, he works a lot with the singers. I mean, he's a very much a singer's conductor. Um, and he's very knowledgeable with the voice. My God, he was always so subtle. Like if he had something to say, he'd come up to you close and he'd say, maybe make that more ooh, or he'd never kind of humiliate you in front of the cast, or not even humiliate, but he would just come to you and say it quietly, and then it would be fixed. But he's
Mhm.
so he's so knowledgeable with voices and with technique, and this was the main thing with Papano, whereas with Gian Andrea, he didn't talk much or anything about technique to singers. It was more musical ideas and this. But yeah, they were very, very, very different,
Yeah.
but both just as impressive, of course. I'm so lucky to have worked with both of them. Gian Andrea was such a warm person. I actually got to spend a lot of time with him in, events surrounding the new ring cycle, and with his lovely wife as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we, yeah, very different approaches, but both very special. Yeah.
John Andre has a wonderful habit. He doesn't do it always, but only at certain times. And I always look for it after he's conducted either symphonically or operatically. If he's very attached to a particular score, at the end of the performance, he will close the score and bend down. He's not bowing to the orchestra. He bends down and he kisses the book.
Oh,
And
see, I never noticed.
I
Yeah,
just because it doesn't happen all the time. And he
yeah,
does not do that as sort of a signature item. It's when he personally has been deeply moved by the experience, by the music. I've seen him, of course, with the Verdi Requiem. He conducts a magnificent Verdi Requiem mass, but not only. Um, and it's a wonderful thing to watch because he's so connected to this music,
absolutely.
as is Papano in a very different way. But when
Yes,
Gian Andrea kisses a score, he doesn't do that. The audience doesn't necessarily see it because his back is to the audience. So it's really just about his gratitude to the composer, to the librettist. Um,
absolutely.
it's a beautiful moment when it happens, and if it doesn't, it's okay too.
That's okay. I'm sure he loved it
But
just as much. Yeah,
when you're working sometimes with him and you're at a curtain call, just look down in the pit and see what happens.
that's so nice.
It's a
Yeah,
lovely thing to see.
yeah.
Now, you were just very recently in something that if I could have flown across the Atlantic to Paris, Paris is a nice city, of course, but I would have gone very specifically for the performance that you were just in very recently, that you're then soon going to be doing, I believe, in Coventry. Um, I know that a particular opera company near me is planning on doing this opera in the future. I don't know if they've announced it or doing the casting, so I'm not going to say anything. But
Abs-
but you were in Handel's Semele at the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées in Paris in February, and I believe you're going to be at the Royal Opera in July.
Yes.
It's not quite an opera; it's an oratorio. Handel famously wrote his operas in Italian and his oratorios in English. But Semele is particular, even among his magnificent output, because it's the most operatic oratorio one will ever see.
Sure.
It's really a hybrid that happens to be in English. And talk about number one. I mean, the cast is fabulous. You mentioned Ben Bliss. The whole cast is fabulous. And there you were with four superstars, frankly. And I love them all. I especially adore and love Alice Coote.
Oh, me too.
And so, I mean, in a major, major, major way, she's one of the great artists. She's a mezzo-soprano, British. Um, so I want you to talk about number one, how did you wind up in this cast with these superstars? Not that you don't deserve it, but you're a very young artist.
Of course.
But number two, Emmanuel Haim, the conductor, Oliver Mears from Covent Garden. He's Irish, yes, Northern
Yes.
Irish.
No, he's British. He's British.
He was British. Why did I think he was Irish? Okay,
But he was the artistic director of the Northern Irish Opera for a few
yeah,
years.
that's why I think.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
um, so anyway, you wound up at the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées, which is not the Paris Opera. It's a wonderful venue in a very chic part of Paris. You step out on the Avenue Montaigne, if I remember,
Yes.
and Catherine Deneuve may walk by. It's just a very particular, even in Paris, it's a very particular place. The theater is gorgeous. The world premiere of Stravinsky's Sacre de Printemps happened in that theater. The famous riot was there. It's special on all levels. So, how did it happen? How did they find you? Did they know you from Covent Garden? Tell the story.
Yeah, so basically I went to London to sing a snippet of the Rhine Maiden for Papano because they were casting for the Ring. And so I did a working session with Papano, and at the same time they had asked would I prepare Ino's aria from Semele, just to kill two birds with the one stone on the same day. And so I did my working session with Papano, and then I went into the chorus room. I think my audition was on, and I sang for Peter Catona, the casting director there, and Ollie Mears, just the aria from Semele. And then they just, on that day, they said, yeah, that they'd be happy for me to do it. I mean, I didn't know at the time who the cast was.
Ah,
I just knew that they were casting I know. Um, and I didn't really know the opera at all. And I learned the aria for the audition. And so, yeah, that's how it came about. And then when it was announced last year, I saw who the cast was. I mean, Alice Coote is one of my idols since I started singing.
yeah.
Of course, Pretty Yenda is a
Pretty Yende. I mean, wow, assimilate.
superstar. Yeah. And it was her
Yeah,
first Handel role as well.
I know that. That's
Yeah. So
and
it was
Ben
a,
Bliss is Jupiter and Brinley Sherritt, who was on the show as
yes,
Cadmus and Somnus.
yes,
And the other two performers I don't know, Carlo Vistoli and
yeah,
Mariana Hovnan. I'm not reading her name properly. Hovanazian. I'm guessing that's
yes.
Armenian.
Armenian, yes. And Mariana is in the Yetta Parker in Covent Garden. And
Right.
Carlo is a wonderful Italian countertenor. I mean, it was really, and Brinkley and Alice and Pretty and Ben. I mean, honestly, I was just in a room with stars every day for the past 2 months.
So Mariana Hovnazian sang the role of Iris.
Yes.
Okay. Now, what does Ino sing?
So Ino has an aria called Turn Hopeless Lover, which is a beautiful aria, but it's 12 minutes. So unfortunately, it was cut.
Oh,
It doesn't add too much to the story. They added in a recit with the same text for me, but I have lots of other little moments to hopefully shine in it. But I have a really great duet with the countertenor Carlo, and I have a beautiful aria slash duet with Pretty as well in Act Two. So yeah, and
so
it's
is it Juno? I've not seen this for about 15 years. Is it Juno who sings Away, Away, Iris, hence
Iris
away?
Hence Away.
Okay.
Yes.
So, true story. I'm not naming names, but I was teaching at a conservatory 25 years ago, and the teacher was working with a young mezzo who did not have English as her first language. And she could not say away, away, Iris, hence away. And they kept going through this again and again and again. Away, away, Iris, hence away. And finally, it got frustrating. And the teacher said, okay, try this. And what the mezzo sang, and I'm not joking, was away, away, Irish hens away.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
So from that day forward, when I hear it, away, away, Irish hens away.
That's hilarious. I should tell Alice that.
So happy St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, exactly. Uh, no, I mean, this, of course, this aria is amazing. And like Alice is just an artist that is very, like a completely rare artist. I mean, I think she was a little bit afraid of me because every time I'd see her, I just like, Alice, like you're my inspiration. Like honestly, I couldn't tell her often enough how much she has inspired me up to this date. I mean, with so much of this for Mahler, the song repertoire, concert repertoire, Handel, her Baroque. I mean, everything she does. She was
I
also
try to
BBC.
keep it to 3 times a year that I gush. She and I share a birthday, so that
Ah,
we always communicate on our birthday. And, but, and I'll tell her then. And usually every 4 months, I'll say, oh, by the way, I just wanted you to know. Because as a young man, so talk about that. Alice's mid career, she is outstanding. She brings so much to her roles, to her music making, to everything. You as a young artist, what is it that captures Alice Coote for you?
I think it's her. I mean, it's her versatility, her storytelling, her. personality. I mean, she's such a well, I've gotten to know her now recently, of course, through this more personally, but she is such a real person, and I think it really comes through in her artistry. And most artists that inspire me are ones that are real and don't seem when they're performing don't seem too far away from them as people, I think. And I think, Alice is one of those, absolutely. And the fact that she can, she was telling me that she's doing a concert soon with Ella Fitzgerald and all this stuff. I mean, she sings jazz, she sings pop stuff, like she can sing anything. And that's what I want to be able to do, She doesn't box herself into a category. She is just an artist. And yeah, for me it's very, very inspiring.
Did you happen to see the video done at the Met of the same production of Hansel and Gretel that you were in, where Alice played Hansel?
Yes, I have seen that. Yeah, in this lovely little shirt with the braces
She's
and the
the most
shorts.
little boy that I've ever
Yeah,
seen anyone play that role. Not
absolutely.
because she's a mezzo singing a boy role, but she gets the physicality, the awkwardness of a little boy, and the sweetness, and
Well,
the
actually, funny that you say that with the because she's done so many Treasure roles. Of course, she's so famous for Octavian and for what Ariodante and all these. But she told me she had a problem with her knees during Semele, and she said she thinks it's from playing so many trouser rolls, so often having to throw herself onto the ground, running around, being the boy. Um, but yeah, she just said she loved these roles so much, and I mean she's was incredible as a boy, and as a man. I mean, with everything she does, she's incredible. But she's done mostly these things, yeah, these roles.
so I hope to have her on this program soon.
Oh, great.
I'll let you know. I'll let the world know.
Do.
Um, so Emmanuel Haim is, am I pronouncing her name correctly?
Manuela Haim, yeah, yeah.
Yes. Conducted and is a specialist, I would venture to say, in Handel, not only, but certainly in Handel. And Oliver, as you called him, Ollie Mears, staged it. Was it a semi-staging because of the theater, or?
No, it was full blown production.
Uh-huh.
I always thought that in the Théâtre Champs-Élysées that it's more concerts, but they do full productions. They're just about
Yeah.
to do Werther there and Rosenkavalier, I think also. Yeah, so it was full production.
Paris is amazing that it has its two famous opera houses and this. It's a bit like Berlin, but even more so in certain ways. It's a remarkable city, the city of music. There's so much going on musically in Paris.
Yeah.
The Châtelet, everywhere you go, I can go to
Comique.
Paris and
Yeah.
every night of the week go to something musical. I need to eat too when I'm in Paris, but nonetheless, and Paris means the greatest movie city in the world. I love cinema. And
Sure.
when I'm in Paris, I studied there a long time ago now when I was 2021. Um, I got in the habit of going to a film every day. And I still do that in Paris when I'm there.
That's so nice.
More than any place in the world, you can do that and discover new rare films from the Congo or from Bolivia or from North Korea or a classic French film from the 1930s or a complete series of Henry Fonda films. You never know.
Sure.
And there's a little guide. It used to be called Periscope, like Periscope, and it cost €1, and it lists everything happening in the week. I
Wow.
changed the name from Periscope to something else, but um, it's a remarkable city for performing arts in addition to visual arts, culinary arts, and just walking around the city. Um, so talk about working with Manuel Hyman and learning the style, so to speak.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I went into the production a little bit nervous, as I haven't done much Baroque, even though I know it's something that suits me and I would love to do a lot more of it. Um, and so I wasn't sure if Emanuela would take to me because I am not, I'm not a specialist. But she was incredible and I learned so much from her. Even how to do a proper Baroque trill, about ornamentation. I mean, she actually sent us the ornaments she'd like us to do like months before in our areas. So, but of course, she wasn't stuck to them. I mean, you could do things yourself as well, but she is such a dedicated conductor. She is so passionate. She adores the rehearsal room. I mean, she's just so involved every day. She's there every day. She didn't miss one rehearsal. Um, and it just flows out for this music. I mean, it's so beautiful to watch her, and to just work with her and learn from her. Yeah, it was really, really an amazing experience.
And also Pretty Yende, who is a fabulous artist, um, who is superb at bel canto, superb in almost everything I've seen her do, but really superb in La Fille de Regiment, one of the best Lucia di Lammermoors I've ever seen, and I've seen everybody, but really one of the best. But that's Donizetti. I'm sure she does some Bellini. She does those roles. But I wonder how, based on your experience, but also you're listening to her, how does the voice move differently in Handel in Baroque than it does in bel canto?
Well, I think she took like a very similar approach, you know. The voice seemed very fit, very naturally into Handel. It's of course super agile. She's a super agile voice. And the famous aria from Semlane, No, no, I'll take no less. And it's really, really, really fast. And she is like, honestly, it was stunning. And she's so musical. I mean, I think that the main thing with Pretty is her musicality. And of course, Handel requires very, very strong musicality, of course, and spontaneity and all this kind of thing. And you could hear Pretty now and then changing ornaments in a certain night, yeah, I think she'll do a lot more Handel. It was beautiful, and she's such a natural instrument. That is very, very moving. Yeah, it was beautiful.
I'd like to take her back to Monteverdi and see her do Popea.
Oh, I think it would be perfect for her.
She would be a sensational Popea.
Yes.
All right, I'm putting that out into the operatic
Yes,
ether for anybody who
exactly.
wants to take my idea. So you're doing it again at the Royal Opera House in London. And I would guess, I haven't checked it, but I would guess that it premiered in London because Handel
Oh,
premiered most of his works in London.
okay. Yeah.
I'm not certain. I'm just guessing
I
that.
don't
But
know either. I'll
he
look it up.
premiered just about everything in London except Messiah, which was premiered in Dublin.
Dublin,
Um,
exactly.
and so I wonder what will be like to be singing before his home crowd. Your home crowd is Ireland, the world now, but Ireland. We're going to get to Ireland in a bit.
Yeah.
But I can only imagine that it's going to be an absolute sensation in London because there's a big Handel constituency in London. Alice Coote is basically hometown. Brinley Sherritt is hometown. Ben Bliss is American, Pretty Andy, South African. You're Irish. So you're looking forward to it?
Yeah, I really am. I mean, it's going to be different because in Paris we did it at 4:15 Baroque pitch, and in London we're going to do it at modern pitch. So that
Explain that to people who don't know what that means.
yeah, so basically Baroque pitch, so the tonality is like you could say nearly a half tone lower in
Huh.
Baroque pitch. So if you're singing a C, it's usually a B. And so we did it at lower pitch in Paris, and we're going to do it a half tone higher in London. It doesn't really affect me because I haven't that much to sing, and actually I know is anyway quite low, so I'll be happy to bring it up a half a tone. But it does change it, and we have a different choir, we have a different orchestra, we have a different conductor. So Emmanuel Haim is not coming to London.
Ah,
Yeah, so we have Christian Kernan
yes.
in London. So it will be very different. But yeah, I mean, to bring it to Covent Garden is going to be very special, I think, and to an English crowd. Yeah.
You happen to know if it's being broadcast either on BBC or anyway? Because I want to hear it.
I'm sure it'll be on BBC.
Yeah.
We're definitely not doing like a cinema broadcast, but I'm sure it'll be on the radio. Yeah.
So, um, you're in Ireland right now. I adore Ireland. That's no secret. Um, you you're part of a great tradition. A great tradition, although music in Ireland is ancient and there's a harp on your flag. I mean, music is central to Ireland. Um, but within that great tradition, there was a woman named Veronica Dunn, Ronnie Dunn, who I had met before I met you, and then I attended classes that she was doing, and I stood up and did some stuff. And you were one of the singers. There was a Korean baritone, as I recall,
Yes.
and this young Irish bass, and you were the mezzo, and I'm not recalling the soprano right now,
The
but
soprano was it Sarah Shine? I can't remember actually who it was. Yeah.
but all of you were great. The young bass was very nervous, and I
Oh,
felt bad for him, but it was his first time, and there he was in front of the class and so forth. But Veronica Dunn, Ronnie Dunn, was a legendary teacher. And I was invited to this because Deborah Keller, who was the wonderful president and director of the Royal Irish Academy of Music, I had met her years before. I've done various music stuff in Ireland, in Dublin and Wexford primarily. And we got to watch this class that Ronnie was doing. And Ronnie, I should say Deborah, had the great idea that Ronnie's gifts and heritage would last longer if she not only taught singers, but if she taught teachers. And that's why I spoke to you at the very beginning about the concept of education in Ireland, because I think it was Deborah's idea that the generations would benefit from the Veronica Dunn method, let's call it, if there were teachers all over the small but wonderful country of Ireland who taught the way she taught and transmitted what she tried to transmit. And that's a remarkable thing. I can't think of any other, I shouldn't say that, but there are violin tradition playings that go back to the past. But for vocalism, there are not that many. There's Garcia going back to the 1830s, but who knows what Garcia taught? But Veronica Dunn sang in the 1950s and 60s and then became a great teacher and, excuse me, was largely based at the Royal Irish Academy of Music in Dublin. So when did you first meet her? Did you audition for her? How did it come to pass that you became a student of Veronica Dunn?
yeah, well, so actually my mom had mentioned Veronica Dunn's name to me as being maybe a teacher that I could possibly study with. And at the time I didn't know who she was. I was only 17, I think. I'd heard the name, but I thought it was very far away from maybe what it was would be possible for me. And so my mom said, let's go to Dublin one day because I'm from Cork, for south of Ireland. And let's go up to Dublin and maybe see if we can call into the academy. My mom knew she was teaching there and see if we can maybe see her. And so we called in and we went to Deborah, and Deborah brought us up to her. And I remember I sang for Ronnie O mio babbino caro because I thought I was a soprano. I was very soon later told that I wasn't by Ronnie. And so I went up to her and she said she had another student at the time and she sent them out and she brought me in and I sang Alison Young, her pianist who recently passed as well, played. And I sang O mio babbino and she said to me, you have to study with me. And I kind of went, okay, because my plan was to study in Cork. Of course, it would have been more natural as I was living there. And I said, I was going to go to Cork. And she said, no, you have to study with me. And I said, okay. She said, I'm going to call Deborah up here now and tell her you have to you have to come here. And of course, Ronnie was hilarious because Ronnie never understood that you have to do an entrance exam, that you have to audition, that you have to, pass all the other things. You have to do your leaving cert and get, all of these things. But Ronnie just said, no, you're going to study here. And so then, Deborah said, well, of course, we have to do the official audition and all this. So I did the audition and then I got in and then I started with Ronnie in September. I think this was maybe May when I saw her in Dublin. And so that's how it started. And she said to me then, I'll get you onto the international stages. I'll get you there. And I was like, oh my God, because I wasn't sure at the time whether I wanted to do opera or whether I wanted to do musical theatre, because I also loved musical theatre. It was my whole childhood and teenage years was musical theatre based. But my voice was always much more classical, and but I wasn't sure if I liked opera because I didn't know anything about opera. And so Ronnie made my mind up for me. And I went there and I started studying with her in September, and I had maybe 5 lessons a week with her. So that's kind of how it started.
So it's interesting. We have something in common. I was on one of my frequent visits to Dublin. I had known of the Royal Irish Academy of Music. I didn't know where it was. And I was walking down a street in the city center, and I looked to my right, and there was a door, and it said Royal Irish Academy of Music. And I thought, okay, I'll walk up a couple of steps, I'll knock on the door and see who's there. And there was a lovely, everyone's lovely Dublin, charming guard, and he was seated there, and he said, "Where you from? New York." Not going to do the accent. "Where you from? New York City." And "You like music?" "Yes, I do. This is what I do." He says, "We should have you meet Deborah." And he called up the president of the Royal Age and said, "There's a young man up here. He should come up to see you." And
Yeah,
that's how the same thing as knocking on the door, which is
amazing.
just a remarkable. I mean, imagine Juilliard or in Vienna or the school at La Scala, you name it, or Covent Garden, it wouldn't happen. And
I'm
yet
sure.
they have such a high level of achievement and of students that have turned out who have had superb careers. It's a remarkable thing. It just is. And I'm not telling all the listeners to fly to Dublin, knock on the door, because you should fly like everyone else.
Exactly.
But if it happens, as it happened to me, and apparently it happened to you as well, um, it is possible. And so talk, if you would. I always called her Veronica, although people called her Ronnie, but I called her Veronica.
Yeah.
Um, what what was the secret to her teaching methods?
Well, of course she had a wonderful technique that she taught her students, but the main thing about Ronnie was that she kind of prepared you for the industry as well as the singing. Um, you know, why she worked for me was her technique was very simple in that she used very simple language to teach. I mean, it was just about what was natural. There was never any kind of question about how. You just breathe and you sing. So her main thing was about breathing. She would bring us in at 9 o'clock in the mornings to do breathing exercises as a group, about expanding the ribs and holding out the breath, holding out the ribs for as long as you can. And she was so adamant on building those ribs. And if you felt Ronnie's back, she had this wide back that she had trained, and just that was her main thing, was bringing the voice as low as it could go, and using the body as the instrument, and about using the cheeks and the mask and bringing things forward, not modifying so much. I mean, it was very, very a very natural approach to singing, and that's why I clicked with her, because that is the way I like to sing. I like singing with a natural instrument and not manufactured. And of course, it can become that way sometimes when you're, learning methods, and sometimes it can become a bit too fake operatic sound, and that's how I sounded for a little while at the beginning. But what attracts me to a singer is natural sound, and that's what Ronnie used to teach us, was this just singing like you're speaking, is what she always said.
So I'm going to make a brief detour, but then we're going to get back to running.
Just
Um,
gonna
in
charge it.
my home, I love to cook,
Yeah.
and I use Irish butter. And in New York City, especially if you're Barbara Streisand, when something is completely natural, you say, and I'll do it in a New York accent, "It's like butter."
It's like butter. That's good. Yeah,
So the Veronica Dunn approach was like butter. It was natural.
absolutely. And if you didn't understand something, she wouldn't let you move on, you know? She'd keep, like, there was never a point with Ronnie where I felt out of my depth about what she was teaching, because like Ronnie had no ego. It was never about her. It was always about the student. And that's she always she did so much for us. She fed us, she gave us money, she let us stay in her house. you know she knew that as a young artist we were going to be poor for a while. And if you she'd always say, do you have money? Like, and I'd say, yeah, I do. And she'd say, are you sure? Because you need to eat. And if you can't, if you do- you know she was just like, she was like a grandmother. And if you had to pay too much rent in Dublin, she'd say, come stay with me for a while and don't pay rent this month. She was a grandmother to us all. She treated us all like we were her favorite, all of us. And she just wanted us to make it, and to be able to reach our full potential as singers. This was her thing.
Now, because I don't remember the precise details, we're just going to have to take it as an example. She told me, and Deborah Kelleher told me this story when it was about 1949 or 1950, and she went to Rome from Ireland. And I don't know if she was a soprano or mezzo-soprano at the time. By the way, we're traveling.
We're traveling. I'm sorry. I'm charging my phone, Fred. It just went. It
Okay,
just went low,
that's okay.
but we
Uh,
got it now.
that's all right. I recently had Hera Haesung Park, the Korean soprano, and she took her phone into a taxi and went zooming through New York City, and we did it in a taxi.
Are you
So,
serious?
I'm
Okay.
used to traveling with my guests. Um,
Okay. Perfect.
anyway, Ronnie went to Rome to study, and she lived in a convent like a good Irish girl would do in Rome. And at some point, she sang with Maria Callas, and I don't recall whether it was Traviata or Norma,
Oh,
whether
I
she was
know she sang with
Clotilda
Maria Callas,
or
but I'm
Flora. So I don't remember,
I'm not
but
sure.
nonetheless, she had a direct link to Maria Callas. I've known a few people who have had that direct link. I heard Callas when I was 9 years old. I didn't know what I was hearing. I couldn't. I was not qualified then in any way to explain to you what I heard.
Wow, lucky you.
But I did hear her because my father insisted that I hear Callas, even though he preferred Tibaldi. But there's another example. We're talking about Scotto Frani, Ermin Eliyahu, Leontine Price. Maria Callas was in one group, and Renata Tibaldi was in the other group. And again, both great, but
Sure,
different. Um, but anyway, so Ronnie had that heritage of learning opera traditions and breathing and all of that in Rome in 1950, when
sure.
there were people around who knew Puccini everywhere, who knew Mascagni. Um, you know, she was in that milieu right after World War II. Rome was picking itself up. The Teatro Costanzi, which is the Opera di Roma, Teatro dell'Opera di Roma. They were doing things in Caracalla. They were beginning to do things in the theater. So she was immersed in that remarkable tradition that came out of the classic Italian school of singing. And there was the Maestro Ricci, who I met in the 1970s, but he knew Puccini, and I know that he was teaching in Rome when Ronnie was there. I don't know if she studied with Maestro Ricci, but nonetheless, there was that ongoing tradition. And so, therefore, you and Tara Roth and all the other singers were direct recipients of that.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah,
It is amazing and wonderful. And
yeah,
wonderful that Deborah Kelleher had the idea that Ronnie should teach teachers.
sure,
It's not a given. Most people of that level only teach singers.
sure.
And so it's just brilliant because now throughout Ireland, already a singing nation, there is more of that.
Absolutely. I mean, Ronnie inspired so many people, like, students, teachers. I mean, everyone looked up to Ronnie, and everyone was always interested in what Ronnie was doing right now, or what way Ronnie taught that, or, as well as, like I said, is of course the technique and everything, but you know, the idea of the industry and the idea of what singers should do straight after college. Like, Ronnie was adamant that we had to leave at 21. That was her age. She said, you have to be gone by 21. And I was 21, Tara was 21. when we left, and she just felt there's no time to waste, you know. You have to immerse yourself in the industry as young as you can. And she never believed that it was going to be harmful for you. Um like you were only going to learn from that experience, you know. And if ever I rang Ronnie when I was in Munich and said, "Oh, I was having a hard day or it was tough," she would just say, "Get on with it, you know. These are the times you learn, you know." So she was tough. Ronnie was really tough, but in the best way possible. She set us all up for the hard industry that was ahead, you know.
So I've never asked this question before about Ronnie, about anyone really, but certainly about Ronnie. Today being March 14th of 2025, we're about to celebrate St. Patrick's Day, the patron saint of Ireland. What was Irish about Veronica Dunn?
I guess Ronnie was she was very honest. I think we're very honest people, and what you see is what you get. You know, hardcore worker, you know, you the hours you put in is what will, you know, I know it's not just Irish, but she was very, yeah, she was very you know, the work you put in is what you're going to get, and she was very much, you know, that way. It's, you know, you have to suffer a little bit to get what you want, you know. It's never going to be an easy path. um and I thought that, yeah, that's very true to Ronnie. I thought that this thing was just very, Ronnie thing was like very, you know, there was no what's the word, like there was no easy way around the career. And I think that's a very Irish thing, is, you know, kind of hard work pays off. And I don't know, yeah, I guess, yeah, Ronnie,
There's
that's
another element that you are too modest to say, but some people know that there's someone I take care of here in New York who does very well, but sometimes I need to bring in help. And I brought in an Irish lady recently named Annie for a while. And now Annie's gone because we only needed her for about a month. And Annie was and is the most loving person that one can imagine. And there is this deep affection and lovingness, if that's a word, about so many Irish people. I won't say all, but so many Irish people that adds to the sauce. And it's the Irish butter in the sauce. And so Annie would come here with Irish tea and biscuits, and she would talk and really talk. And the nice thing was, she was a communicator and she was a listener. And somehow making that tea, whatever was going on that was problematic or had to be addressed, it was done in the most loving way over a cup of tea. And whether it was a medication to take or whatever, it was done with such genuine love. And I was reminded, because I've not been to Ireland for a few years, that aspect of the country.
Of course. And yes, maybe it was too modest to say, but yeah, I mean, you know, I always cannot wait to get back to my country,
I
to
know.
Ireland. I do feel like it is, of course I'm biased, but it is the people here are very special, very warm, very giving, very much givers, open people, you know. And Ronnie was definitely that. I mean, who would let their students live in their house? You know what I mean? I
The
mean,
money.
yeah, and giving money. I mean, she'd never let us buy a coffee. Like, she'd always give us money to buy ourselves a coffee and her a coffee. You'd never have to reach to your own pocket.
So
I
was
mean,
it coffee or tea with Ronnie?
it was a skinny latte was her order. A
I
skinny
in Ireland got
latte
the tea.
and a green banana was always her thing. So skinny latte and green banana.
Why a green banana?
I don't know. She just always wanted a green banana. She didn't want a ripe banana.
Okay, well, maybe because it's an Irish banana.
Maybe, yeah, exactly. No, but I guess, yeah, the generosity. I mean, of course, there's generous people everywhere, but I really do feel that we are very warm, open, generous people, and she was definitely that. Yeah.
So listeners will know that I had Dervla Collins on a few months ago in November, I believe, because there's now the Veronica Dunn International Singing Competition the Dervla. I believe the title is artistic director.
Yes.
A great musician on her own. Knew Ronnie very well, and I had her on so she could talk about continuing the tradition of Veronica Dunn through the competition. That Ronnie, in the early years of the competition, sat as one of the judge. She did judge, yes, or did
Did
she not?
No, she never did
Okay,
because there were a good few for students competing and stuff. So
sure,
yeah, yeah.
sure. So she sat with her green banana and listened.
Absolutely, and her skinny latte, and she could have five a day. And she that like I mean, teaching kept her going, of course, but she used to live really from skinny lattes and bananas through her whole
Wow.
day of teaching. Yeah.
So, um, you participated in the competition when
Yes.
as you said, when you're a very young artist. I think you said you got to the quarterfinals.
Yes.
Have you participated in a lot of competitions, or because in your particular case you were heard by Henning Rua and you were taken to Munich, you probably avoided that route and that whole reality for some singers?
I did, thankfully, because I mean, I only did that one international competition, and then other than that, I competed in like local competitions in Dublin and that. But no, luckily I didn't have to go down that route. I mean, I could have still done competitions when I was in Munich and after Munich, but I tried to avoid them as best I could,
Yeah.
because I always found that I'm much better performer when I am on stage in a production or,
Mhm.
with an audience rather than a jury. Um, so luckily, but I know that there's a lot of singers out there who really thrive in competitions and who have made their careers through competitions. It just wasn't my route, and I do feel, now I could still apply for Operalia and I could still apply for all these competitions, but I feel lucky to be working and to be, already, yeah, this is my career and this is what I'm doing every day now. So luckily I don't have to, but I mean I still could, but sometimes it's more harmful than positive to a singer who's already working, I think.
True. I agree with you.
Yeah.
Now I know we would have spoke about Alice Coote, who we love. There's another singer, mezzo-soprano, who you love, who I love. I don't know her at all. I've met her once, but we don't have any connection relationship. Elena Garancha, who is a fantastic singer, coming back to the Met, we hope in May, to sing Amneris. I've never
Yes.
heard her do Amneris, and I have a ticket on in May at some point. And what is it that you like about Elena Garancha?
Yeah,
Why is
I
she a
think
mezzo soprano?
as we were talking earlier, about actually I have a picture of her right up there. But as we were talking about earlier, the singers who can risk vocally, or the singers who Alina is definitely one of the ones who wouldn't risk as much, I feel like. She is a stunning artist, but like really is a vocal perfectionist. I mean, it is always flawless. And I think it's the technique. It's kind of her presence. She has this presence. I mean, she walks into a room and you just can't not look, and that's something that is really inspiring to me, is a person with this aura and with presence and this vocal stamina and technique. I mean, in my opinion, she is the best vocal technician, mezzo maybe at the moment.
In
And
my
yeah,
view, it's not just her physical beauty, and she's very beautiful, but
beautiful.
her aura, as you said, which is something other than physical beauty.
Absolutely. And it's something that can't be taught, of course. You either have that or you don't, and it's just beautiful to watch. And yeah, I actually did hear her Amneris in Munich recently, and you're in for a treat. It is spectacular. Yeah.
So one more thing about her, I hope you can take advantage of this. I was in her presence, apart from hearing her sing a lot, when she gave a master class at Carnegie Hall.
Ah,
And she turned out to be one of the best teachers I've ever come across. And not that I wouldn't expect it, but she was a fantastic teacher.
Yes,
So
that
next time you're with her, you tell her she doesn't know me, but you tell her I said so and study with her.
absolutely. I mean,
Frankly,
recently,
after Veronica Dunn, I would then tell you to go to Adela Garancha.
oh, if I could, wouldn't that be amazing? I mean, she recently just did a masterclass in Dublin. She was doing a concert in the concert hall, and she did a masterclass with the studio members of Irish National Opera. And I thought the same. She was a brilliant teacher and was like tough but was encouraging, and had a similar approach to Ronnie in that a very, like, very natural technique, and speaking like singing like you're speaking, and that's what I like about her voice as well. It's a very natural instrument.
But also in this class I attended, she found the right words for each student.
Exactly.
And English is not her first language, but her English is flawless,
Yes.
remarkably wonderful, broad English with a sophisticated vocabulary. But she always found the right word, and that to me is part of the essence of good teaching, is to be able to not only understand what's at issue, but explain it in a way that's clarifying, but also not humiliating or nerve wracking.
Exactly, and taking each student individually, and seeing what each needs. Exactly, yeah.
So you mentioned that you love musical theater. I know you
Yes.
love Barbara Streisand.
Yeah.
What is it about Barbara Streisand?
Well, Barbara Streisand was one of the first artists I heard, I guess. My mom had her album and would play it in the car. And I remember on the CD there was a booklet where with all the lyrics of each song. And I remember I knew every single lyric because I used to read them in the car and sing along. And yeah, I guess it was the first singer that I kind of, not that I thought I was similar to, but I found similarities in our kind of colors. I mean, I wish I could sing like Barbra Streisand, but I do find that her repertoire suits me very well, and I love to sing that repertoire. Um, I think it's her color, her musicality, of course. It's like her storytelling. Um, yeah, she's just a very
Her
special one in my eyes.
rubato. Would you talk about rubato? If you agree with me, if you don't, that's fine.
Yeah.
Um, Her ability to slightly delay or slightly push forward a note in a way that, especially a song like People or Don't Rain on My
Oh,
Parade
my
or
favorite.
The
Yeah.
Way We Were, that we've heard her sing it 1,000 times, she will then sing it in a different way. Ella Fitzgerald did this so that it's suddenly unexpected, but it makes perfect sense. And
Yeah, I get.
Aretha Franklin did this, where they would live within the song and then find something new, even after having sung it 1,000 times.
Yeah, I mean that's it. It's the kind of the spontaneity and the it's always a fresh performance when they sing a song that they've sung. It's just, I guess, musicality. The musicality she has is like second to none. I mean, People, that's one of my favorite songs. Um, and it always sounds like she's just speaking and telling you a story. And I think opera singers can learn so much from these kind of singers. It's the same thing, it's just a different style of singing, but it's the storytelling that she's able to convey is just very, very special.
So People is from the original Broadway show Funny Girl, which I saw
Amazing.
about a week after I heard Maria Callas when I was 9,
Oh,
and was taken to meet Barbara Streisand.
oh,
She was lovely and served me tea. I'll never forget that, of course. When you're in a dressing room, she always had a tea, a little tea, getting the word in English now. Not a tea,
teapot,
a teapot. Thank you.
teapot. Yeah.
That's just in a teapot. And teacups, and she would drink tea, and she said, "You want some tea?" in her Brooklyn
Oh
accent.
my.
Yes. And I studied about her and about the show Funny Girl, which is a terrific show. And Julie Stein, who wrote the score, in his memoir, wrote that Barbara Streisand wanted to delete the song People. She didn't like it. She didn't get it. And he said to her,
Okay.
if you delete People, you're not going to be singing Funny Girl because it
That's
reveals an
funny.
aspect of the character of Fanny Bryce that was completely different from all the other songs in the show. And
Okay.
they had quite an argument over that because Miss Streisand is firm in her opinions, even when she was 21 years old. And finally, he prevailed, and thank goodness, because imagine having the show Funny Girl without the song people.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's an amazing story. I didn't know
Yeah,
that. And that you met her. Oh, lucky you.
yeah, three times.
Wow.
When I was a kid, always when I was, I've never worked with her, but when I was
Yeah.
9 and 10 years old, I met her on three occasions.
Amazing.
Um, so I want to conclude because you're still at the start of your career
Yeah.
and you've done so much. Um, I know that for many mezzo sopranos, one of the North Star roles is Octavian in the Rosenkavalier. Now, I know that you sang with the Munich Opera Company here. I unfortunately was not here in a concert version at Carnegie Hall of De Rosenkavalier, but not Octavian. What
Yes.
did you play?
I sang the second orphan, actually. One of the Adlige Weisen. Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, it was like, it's only a small little 1 minute scene, but we were
yeah.
brought to Carnegie Hall with Kirill Petrenko. Yeah, it was amazing.
And who was Octavian in that performance?
Angela Brower, the lovely Angela
Oh,
Brower.
from
Yes.
Arizona. Okay.
Yes.
So,
And Hannah Elizabeth Miller was Sophie, and Marlies Peterson was
oh,
the Marcellin. Yeah.
that's a great. I've seen Marlies Peterson do the Marshall.
Yes.
Um, so it is a summit. It's a very long role. He is the title character. Um, it's a different role from Hansel because he's a young man. He's a certain aristocratic bearing. Um, there's a great deal of stage business. There's a great deal of singing. There's a great deal of having to respond in the moment. There's a great deal, the way I spoke before about Violetta and Flora, it's the same thing with the Marshal in that you, Octavian, are interacting with her initially, but then with Baron Ox and Sophie. And although a lot of people think the opera is about the Marshal, it really is about Octavian. And it's about his journey from the very beginning and what he learns and the obsheet, the farewell at the end when he leaves the Marshal and then goes off with Sophie, understanding what he's lost, what he's gained, and what he learned. And it's a huge story for him.
Sure.
And you're preparing this. Talk about that.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to debut the role next season. It hasn't been announced yet, but I'll sing it next season. And I mean, the reason I said Rosenkavalier to you is just I saw a performance of it in Munich before I sang the Orphan,
Yeah.
and it was just like, one of those moments, those musical moments in your life that, like, I've only could name five maybe. It The performance of Rosenkavalier that night was like life changing for me, and I can't really tell you why, or it was just I sobbed after it, and it was one of the only times that that's happened to me. It just deeply moved me. The story and this love triangle, and then I was actually in a relationship after this that with an older man who I'm very, very friendly with still. Um and yeah, I just feel a certain connection to this story and to this role and to this music, of course. And yeah, it's my dream over Carmen or any of the roles to sing it, and I'll do it next season.
So, Niamh O'Sullivan, your first name is spelled Niamh.
Yes.
How did the Germans pronounce it?
Oh God. I was called everything. I was called Nymph, Niam, Nimaha, Nyam Nyam, everything. I had a masterclass with Anna Tomova Sintov,
Oh,
and she said, Nyam Nyam is next. So I was called everything. But it's very nice to have for the name to be exotic
yeah.
elsewhere, because in Ireland it's a very, very common name. So yeah.
Well, there's an I and an A in it, and I still struggle to get in the double consonant when I pronounce it. You
Yes.
permitted me to say knee, but I know it's a little more than that. And one thing I find very interesting because I study how to do these things. Um, people in Jamaica, in the Caribbean, in the Gulf of Mexico, have that double vowel that they do very well. So there's a Jamaican lady I knew who, when a Jamaican arrives or comes, they don't arrive or come, they reach. Hey man, I reach, but they do the EA in such a way that both letters are sounded, which is
Okay.
remarkable to me. So I'm trying to remember, her name is Merle, how Merle would pronounce the double vowel. So I can, it's not Niamh, it's not Neve, it's, you say it,
It's Niamh.
Niamh,
Niamh. That's perfect. Yeah. And
Niamh,
in Dublin or in the west of Ireland, they say Niamh. So
yeah,
it's but in Cork we say Niamh. Yeah.
Niamh.
Yeah.
Well, Niamh O'Sullivan, happy St. Patty's Day to you.
Thank
I'm going to
you.
have my cup of Irish tea here and my biscuits and think of all my beloved Irish friends and artists and your wonderful country and the wonderful people there and how disproportionate. We didn't even talk about Irish literature, my goodness, how a
Of
little
course.
country of 4 or 5 million people has disproportionately enriched the world's culture many times its size. And you were part of that. So I thank you very much.
Thank you, Fred.